It's May 27th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories, making the headlines at this hour. Starting with the third and final presidential TV debate. With the snap presidential election to take place exactly a week from today, the four main runners participate in their last televised debate tonight, this time on political issues. They'll be preparing for that final discussion on Tuesday, with no official schedule publicized. Germany's chancellor says there will no longer be range restrictions on weapons supplied to Ukraine for use against Russia. The Kremlin called the decision dangerous, saying it would be detrimental to sealing any sort of peace agreement. North Korea's Mount Kumgang could be set for a UNESCO World Heritage designation after a 4-year bid, the UN body says. Once confirmed, it'll be the regime's third UNESCO World Heritage site. South Korea will elect its new president a week from today, and the final TV debate between the four major runners will take place tonight. The third debate between Democratic Party candidate Lee Jae-myung, People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo, Reform Party's Lee Jun-seok, and Labor Party's Kwon Young-guk will be held at MBC studio in Seoul for 2 hours from 8 p.m. The candidates will discuss political polarization and debate political reform and constitutional amendment. Other topics will include foreign affairs and security policy. The debate will also be televised here on Arirang TV. And the presidential candidates are pushing their final campaign stretch. The Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung is now wooing voters with his diplomacy pledges, including a solid South Korea-U.S. alliance. Our correspondent Shin-young reports.
Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung on Monday pledged to strengthen South Korea's diplomacy and security amid a rapidly changing international order. He said he would pursue pragmatic diplomacy centered on the national interest based on a strong South Korea-U.S. alliance. He added that he would work to rebuild trust in the alliance, which he says was damaged by a declaration of martial law. He also emphasized close trilateral cooperation with the U.S. and Japan while maintaining a firm stance toward Tokyo when it comes to historical issues.
We need to take a principled stance on historical and territorial issues. At the same time, areas like security, the economy, society, and culture shouldn't be overly restricted because of the historical and territorial issues. While it's not easy to separate these issues, we should approach other areas in a practical way that looks toward the future.
On China, Yi described it as an important trading partner and highlighted the need for stable Seoul-Beijing relations. Regarding North Korea, Yi aims to ease tensions on the Korean peninsula and achieve peace through denuclearization. He said Pyongyang's nuclear threats can no longer be ignored and vowed to work closely with the U.S. to resolve the issue. He also pledged to improve human rights for the North Korean people. Meanwhile, entering the final week of the official campaign period, he held rallies in the Seoul metropolitan area, focusing this time on southeastern Gyeonggi-do province.
Lee Jae-myung has promised to make southeastern Gyeonggi-do province a better place to live with improved access to education, housing, and transportation.
Earlier on Monday, he met with college students in Suwon to hear about the challenges they face with school and finding jobs. He said it's a serious problem that young people are worried about housing and stressed the need for more public dormitories.
It's a real problem that students have to worry about housing. The government should step up and use unused campus land to build more public dormitories.
He also pointed out issues including high meal costs and emphasized the need to expand programs like the 1,001 meals. Shin-young, Arirang News.
And on the same day, the People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo continued to invest much of his time and effort in the capital area, where he touted his economic accomplishments during his time as a Gyeonggi-do province governor. Our Kim Do-yeon has more.
The capital region is yet again the People Power Party's candidate Kim Moon-soo's focus. The region, consisting of half of the nation's population, is always a battleground region, and Kim could be seeing some hope of winning votes in Gyeonggi-do province, especially as he served 2 terms as governor with a track record of job making.
During my 8 years as Gyeonggi-do governor, in total I created 43% of all jobs in the nation. I created the most jobs and hosted Samsung's Pyeongtaek chip complex, made Pangyeok Techno Valley and LCD complexes for LG.
He in fact visited the Pyeongtaek Samsung Electronics campus himself. The complex is known to be the largest in the world by land mass. There he spoke of how he supported industries and that it's worrisome for him that Samsung and other big companies recently are leaving for other nations such as the US because of tariffs. Meanwhile, as he rallies around the province, he's been trying to compare himself to his DP rival Lee Jae-myung, who was a governor here also more recently. He's been putting the focus on the legal risks that arose from his time as the mayor of a city in the province and a former governor of the province, while Kim has no legal issues from his terms. As for the election landscape, the PPP believes that the DP's lead is narrowing compared to the beginning of the election campaign, and in the next 8 days they're trying to make a comeback. One big move, of course, is left for the party: the merger with the Reform Party.
I propose that the Reform Party present its conditions for a potential merger. We are prepared to do everything we can to make it happen. And let me be clear, we are fully ready to embrace the Reform Party's policies for the younger generation, especially those in their 20s and 30s.
Of course, the ballots are already being printed, and the Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-seok's name will be on it on June 3rd, regardless of the merger, who of course says it won't happen. Kim Do-il, Arirang News.
So Reform Party candidate Lee Jun-seok has reaffirmed his resolve to remain in the race, rejecting the People Power Party's push for a merger. The resolve was shared on Monday, with Lee adding that his party is determined to run and win the race, and that the PPP should pressure its own candidate to resign, not him. The 40-year-old contender recently saw his approval rating reach 10% amid growing support from those in their 20s and 30s, and also from moderate voters. So, just 7 days away from the June 3rd presidential election, we have our political correspondent Oh Soo-young in studio to discuss the latest developments. Soo-young, good to see you again.
It's always nice to see you, Tammy.
So, Soo-young, next Tuesday is the election day, but still the voting has been well underway for Koreans overseas, and we've seen the turnout, the highest turnout to date.
That's right, Tammy. So preliminary figures released by the National Election Commission on Monday show that overseas voting saw a record turnout of 79.5%. Some 205,000 people out of 258,000 who registered to cast their ballots overseas showed up at polling stations across 118 countries. It's the biggest turnout since 2012, when the country adopted absentee voting. The previous presidential election saw 71.6% and last year's general election 62.8%. Now this week, on-board voting began for 4 days starting Monday, and on Thursday, 2 days of early voting will begin domestically from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m.
So it seems the stakes are higher, as we are expecting the overall turnout to be high as well. Now, that race is also getting that much tighter.
That's right, Tammy. So the Korea's pollsters last week released their final figures for this election before the race happens, until voting day happens next week. And
right.
We can see that while Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung is still the clear frontrunner, the gap between him and the People Power Party's Kim Moon-soo has shrunk considerably in Gallup's survey, from a 22-point margin to 10 points in just a week. So what explains the shift in numbers? Well, after a period of disillusionment caused by internal strife between Kim and PPP elders who pushed him to merge with former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, it seems now the so-called shy conservatives are getting behind him after almost 3 weeks of campaigning and his live TV debates.
If you look at the regional voter distribution released monthly by Gallup Korea, Conservatives actually outnumber Progressives. Given this numerical advantage, how actively Conservatives are willing to vote in this election is, in my view, critically important.
Another notable trend was the Reform Party's Lee Jun-seok seeing his support jump to 10% for the first time in this race. Now, this comes after his televised debate with the top two contenders and the Democratic Labour Party's Kwon Young-go. Lee set out distinctive policies on pension reform, healthcare reform and high-tech growth for the country, which largely appeal to moderates and young voters, it seems.
Then, Soo-young, would you say people in their 20s and 30s are a major force among swing voters?
Well, I mean, I say that's really interesting. I mean, what's been really interesting about this election is that against the backdrop of strong regionalism seen over the decades, we're seeing distinct generational differences emerge as a major factor. Those in their 40s and 50s tend to be left-leaning, while people in their 60s and 70s are traditionally conservative. But 20s and 30-somethings are much less regional or ideological.
20s and 30s generations, sort of Gen Z, they grew up in an era of low growth and housing insecurity, and also this digital automation. So they are very skeptical of grand ideological narratives, and also they have a little trust in previous generations' globalist optimism. So their politics is very fragmented, and they're grounded in their identity politics and pragmatism and their personal utility rather than collective and forced ideals.
Following the start of official campaigning and the first TV debate, support for reform's Lee Jun-seok jumped to 26%, closely behind the DP's Lee Jae-myung's 30% among those aged between 18 and 29. The PPP's Kim Moon-soo was significantly behind at 19%. Among independent voters who don't affiliate themselves with any party, preferences for the DP and reform candidates were neck and neck, while the PPP contender fell to third place.
Well, Soo-young, the last time you were in the studio, you suggested that if Lee Jun-seok has that 10% support, it's unlikely that he will merge with the PPP candidate. Is that a still valid suggestion?
Well, of course, it's a personal kind of opinion, but having met Lee Jun-seok last year and exchanging some conversation with him, it became quite clear that he felt he was very badly treated by the PPP, and his spokesperson said that they offered Lee party leadership if he merges with Kim Moon-soo, but he's already been the chairman of the PPP.
Right.
He's left, and he's not the type of person to turn back or simply play the role of a so-called casting voter. He himself has noted that his popularity has reached 10%, saying it will be his name and his party's name on the voting ballots. On Monday, he added that if the PPP wants to pressure anyone to resign, it should be their own candidate, not him. Now, polls show that more than half of his supporters do not want him to merge with the PPP, presumably because they are tired of bipartisan politics between the main right and left-leaning parties. And, well, yes, he does have a narrow chance of winning the race, but the 40-year-old it seems that he's building up a support base for the next presidential election. But again, never say never in politics. We might see the merger issue revisited in tonight's third TV debate, focusing on politics. So if he does change his mind, then he'll have until Wednesday before the early voting starts on Thursday.
Well, plenty of room for twists and turns, even just a week left until the election. So the TV debate tonight will be definitely interesting. Soo-young, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me, Tammy.
Germany says it will scrap the range restrictions on weapons sent to Ukraine, joining the US, the UK, and France, who had earlier lifted the restrictions to allow Ukraine to better target Russian territory. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Germany has joined other Western supporters of Ukraine in removing range restrictions on weapons being delivered to Ukraine. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz on Monday announced that his country will be joining the likes of the United States, the UK, and France in lifting the restrictions in order to allow Ukraine to be better able to hit military targets on Russian territory. Merz says while there will be opposition from some EU member nations, including Hungary and Slovakia, it won't stop Germany and other bloc members from their continuous support of Ukraine. The German chancellor also said a small minority could not be allowed to determine the decisions of the entire European Union, and that by removing restrictions on weapons, Ukraine can now defend itself by attacking military positions in Russia. In response, Russia called the decision dangerous, saying it would be detrimental to any chance of a peace deal, with Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov on Monday saying such decisions are completely at odds with any hopes for a political settlement. The Western allies of Ukraine had initially restricted the use of long-range missiles to targets only within Ukrainian territory under Russian occupation. However, after the dispatch of North Korean troops to the Kursk region, the US and the UK began authorizing the use of long-range missiles to strike targets in Russia. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
North Korea's Mount Kumgang could be set for inscription onto the UNESCO World Heritage List. According to UNESCO on Tuesday, the International Council on Monuments and Sites and the International Union for Conservation of Nature, advisory bodies to the World Heritage Committee, have recommended the inclusion of Mount Kumgang. And Pyongyang had submitted its application back in 2021, but the review process was postponed due to the COVID-19 before evaluation resumed this year. The decision will be made at the 47th World Heritage Committee meeting at UNESCO headquarters in Paris from July 6th to the 16th. If Mount Kumgang becomes officially registered, it'll become North Korea's third World Heritage Site. Standing just over 1,600 meters, it is considered one of the Korean Peninsula's most scenic mountains, along with Baekdusan Mountain. U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to redirect Harvard University grants to U.S. trade schools instead. Though when and how such a plan will be implemented is unclear. An Sung-jin has more.
The feud between the Trump administration and Harvard University continues to escalate. Trump posted on his social media, Truth Social, on Monday that he is, quote, considering taking $3 billion of grant money from a very anti-Semitic Harvard. He said he would redirect the $3 billion in federal grants to trade schools instead. Trump had previously cited concerns over anti-Semitism on campus for freezing $2.2 billion in grants. How Trump is to redistribute the funds and whether the grants come from the funding that he already froze is unclear. His latest remark comes after he demanded Harvard to release the name and nationalities of its international students, and comes less than a week since a judge halted the Trump administration from barring international students enrolling at Harvard. The Ivy League school had previously argued that the administration's actions were a blatant violation of the First Amendment and comes as the university opposes the government's demands to control Harvard's governance, curriculum, and the ideology of its faculty and students. Meanwhile, in a message to mark Memorial Day, Trump denounced what he called USA-hating judges for hampering his immigration policies. Han Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Up until around 10 years ago, South Korea relied on imports for a variety of mushrooms. However, Korea has now successfully localized mushroom production, even cultivating new varieties, and further reducing the burden of royalties paid overseas. Cha Yun-kyung tells us more.
The Korean mushroom variety, Arirang, which has recently begun to be exported to Southeast Asia, has a golden cap with a crisp texture. Even after it is fully grown, the mushroom cap does not spread and remains small, making harvesting and packaging easy. Rural Development Administration developed Arirang in 2018, targeting markets in Asia. This contains more than twice as many antioxidants called polyphenols and GABA, an amino acid which helps regulate nerve activity and relieve stress, similar to the white enoki mushroom.
We did pilot exports of Arirang to Vietnam and Hong Kong, and we received lots of favorable comments, especially for its texture.
The Seoron variety, which is also called the king oyster mushroom, is also a domestic type that is getting attention with its chewy texture. It also has a bigger cap than regular oyster mushrooms, so it is popular as a high-end cooking ingredient. So far, the number of mushrooms developed by the Rural Development Administration amounts to 53 varieties of enoki, button, and oyster mushrooms. Thanks to this, the localization rate of mushrooms rose 28.1 percentage points over 15 years, from 35% in 2009 to 63.1% last year. The royalties paid in foreign countries have thus decreased by more than one-third.
As the varieties we've developed become available to farmers, they can now cut production costs. We can also save royalties paid in overseas on a national level.
The Rural Development Administration is planning to develop more high-quality mushrooms in the near future. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and this is The World Now. Starting in the Middle East, Israeli airstrikes in Gaza killed at least 52 people, including 36 in a school being used as a shelter. On Monday, a school turned shelter in Gaza City's Daraj neighborhood was hit by an Israeli airstrike. Hundreds of people were sheltering there at the time. According to Gaza's civil defense, the attack killed at least 36 individuals and injured dozens of others. The Israeli military stated that the strike aimed at Hamas and Islamic Jihad Command Center, believed to be operating within the school premises. They asserted that the facility was being used for planning attacks against Israeli civilians and troops. A separate strike hit a home in northern Gaza, killing at least 16 others. The recent strikes have drawn international condemnation, including German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, caution against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu regarding excessive military actions, and a discussion in Ireland regarding a potential ban on Israeli imports. On the same day, a new aid system in Gaza opened its first distribution hubs following months of blockade by Israel. 2 people, including a child, were seriously injured and 25 others taken to hospital after a vehicle plowed into a crowd of people celebrating Liverpool FC's Premier League championship victory on Monday. According to reports, a 53-year-old man who is believed to have been the driver was arrested at the scene. The vehicle drove into a crowd of fans on Water Street in Liverpool's city centre just after 6 p.m. as hundreds of thousands of fans gathered to watch Liverpool FC's Premier League victory parade. The vehicle struck several pedestrians before coming to a stop. Authorities are not treating the incident as terrorism, but are investigating what led to the incident and have asked people to refrain from sharing distressing content online. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer described the incident as appalling and said those injured and affected are in his thoughts. In the United States, Charles Rangel, a former U.S. representative from New York and Korean War veteran, passed away on Monday local time at the age of 94. Rangel, a gravelly-voiced Democrat congressman from Harlem, served in the U.S. Army during the Korean War. After military service, Rangel pursued higher education, earning degrees from New York University and St. John's University School of Law. He began his political career in 1970 and served 23 terms in the House of Representatives, becoming the first African American to chair the House Ways and Means Committee. Rangel was also a founding member of the Congressional Black Caucus and ended his 46-year congressional career in 2017. He is survived by his 2 children and 3 grandsons. Finally, in England's Gloucestershire region, thousands gathered for the annual cheese rolling contest on Monday. Participants chased a wheel of double Gloucester cheese weighing approximately 3.5 kilograms down the steep 180-meter slope of Cooper's Hill, continuing a tradition that dates back to at least 1826. German YouTuber Tom Kopke, 23, secured first place in the men's race for the 2nd consecutive year. In the women's race, 20-year-old Ava Sender-Logan from London, who was participating for a food charity group, claimed victory. The tradition is believed to have derived from customs celebrating the return of spring.
It's been quite warm during the day, but as soon as the sun dips, things cool down quickly. So managing your layers will be key to staying comfortable, and that daytime warmth will continue this afternoon. And as temperatures soar, the atmosphere will become unstable, meaning we could see sudden showers developing in the eastern regions this afternoon. These showers can be quite unpredictable, ranging from 5 to 20 millimeters. Meanwhile, expect mostly sunny sunny skies in most parts with the UV index reaching very high levels. Then most parts will see highs topping out at 27 degrees Celsius, but feels like temperatures will be a few degrees lower as the humidity will not be that high. Then daytime temperatures are expected to keep climbing. By the end of the week, we could see highs nearing 30 degrees Celsius here in the capital with a chance of sudden showers.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.